I'm Janet Ruffing. I'm a professor of spirituality at Fordham University in New York City, where I have been living for 23 years. I am Roman Catholic by tradition, but we have been working across the Christian denominations the entire time I've been at Fordham, as well as at Mercy Center in California before that. This is my 25th anniversary of training spiritual directors. I began at Mercy Center in Burlingame 25 years ago with the summer internship in spiritual direction, having been part of that very first group who created the program that is still in existence. I moved to Fordham in 1986, and since then I have been mentoring spiritual directors who are serving all over the world. So it's been a very fruitful ministry. Probably the simplest description is that spiritual direction is a form of accompanying people in their spiritual lives. Ways of describing that, to elaborate that just a little bit more fully, is working on an assumption that God is active and inviting people into relationship with God. That spiritual directors try to help people notice what is happening between themselves and God, and to help the person who comes for spiritual direction to respond to those invitations, however that unfolds for them. So there's a connection between prayer, the relationship with God, and life and mission in the world. There are, I think, several categories of people who benefit. I think anyone benefits from spiritual direction who is consciously living a spiritual life on some level. I think people are helped when they're at a time of change and growth in their life and they're trying to sort out what happens next, what's going on here. I think people are helped in spiritual direction when they are in crisis moments and they become unsure. I think people seek spiritual direction out when their mystical lives start to unfold and they say, "Oh, God is bigger than I thought," and when there's something like that that is both overwhelming and confusing, I think spiritual direction is a huge help. I do believe that spiritual direction is most beneficial for adults who have undergone some kind of spiritual awakening. They don't have to be totally proficient, but they really need to be aware of the spiritual world and able to respond to that, and psychologically developed enough to notice what's going on inside of themselves so they can talk about that. If people need guidance in prayer and meditation, I think that's not uncommon because many of our Christian traditions don't really teach people more than having little chats with God, which is wonderful because people come with a sense that God is approachable, that you can tell God anything that's on your mind, but they don't have any ways of listening or ways of processing or kind of conscious ways of letting God speak to them. That's often a really important development. So if there are not some kind of programmatic things like a centering prayer group or an Ignatian guided contemplation group or something like that, I think spiritual directors really need to give their directees some prayer exercises, to give them some suggestions how to go about a simple reflective reading, the 4 steps of Lectio Divina, or the simple steps of Ignatian contemplation, and see how that goes. The other thing I think is really important, and that I found in my own research over and over again, is that God speaks to us through the events of our lives, and God speaks to us almost universally through music and through nature. So to particularly pay attention or help people place themselves in listening to spiritual music and then being attentive to how it affects them, how it echoes a prayer, how they may experience God addressing them in that way, or experiences in nature, which is really God's first sacrament. And so there's almost a universal sense of communication in the silence and solitude in a natural environment. Inviting people to talk about that, I think, helps them begin to find ways of both listening and of responding to how God is moving in their lives. Spiritual direction is probably one of the best processes of self-care that anybody involved in ministry to other people could ever be engaged in. It keeps us growing in the core of whatever is leading us into our work in the world, our life with our families, our mission, as it were. So spiritual direction helps us keep focused, I think, on the one thing that's most important, which is the spirit energy that is making us fruitful in whatever we do. It also creates a regular opportunity to reflect on our experiences at some depth. And the book that I'm just finishing is going to be called To Tell the Sacred Tale, Spiritual Direction and Narrative. This is a complete revision of a book I wrote 20 years ago. And what I'm discovering in terms of the opportunity for storytelling, that because our lives are moving so rapidly, that our spiritual identities really need a place where we can be most fully who we are, and to regularly be telling our personal God story and spiritual direction is an enormous help to being able to integrate that part of our story with every other part of our lives going on. So there's an integration process, there's a deepening process, there's a fidelity to the journey, and then there's the principle of being in a helping relationship with someone else on the receiving side, instead of only being on the giving side or on the power side of a relationship.